Without doubts, I think it's by far the best league in the world.
How dare you score like that in the Premier League? Mission accomplished in the Premier League. The American.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the American Scousers Premier League show. I am your host, Gally, and I am joined, as usual, I won't say always, but as usual, with my co-host, Mr. Bickler. How are you, my friend?
Oh, it's Monday. The kids are back in school for the first time, which means I'm back to work, which means this Monday sucked. So
pretty much, but you are fresh in your Michigan gear and your Detroit Lions hat, celebrating your number one seed and the bye that they secured last night. You must have been a very happy camper when you won that game, because I won't lie, going into it, I thought the game could end 45-44, and I wasn't sure which team was going to have the 5 at the end of the score. I never in a million years thought Sam Darnold would pick last night to, turn back into Sam Darnold.
You know, I will take any kind of one seed that involves trotting out a defense that is basically comprised of dudes you picked up off the street. It was a good one. It was also a good game for the Vikings to pretend to be Dan Gamble and go for it on fourth down in the red zone repeatedly and not make it. So that helped as well.
Yeah, it really was an interesting one. I wasn't exactly sure how it was going to go. Full disclosure, I slept through, I think, the first half, and then the second half I woke up in a stupor of stupidness, realizing oh bleep, I'm already hungover. It's the same day I started drinking, and I have to work an hour and a half from my home at 7 a.m. tomorrow. So 4:45 was not a fun time to wake up this morning. But hey, we survive a weekend, and a weekend where we didn't have as much VAR drama as we've had in weeks past. We will talk about a few of the key highlighted items. I thought all in all, VAR had a good weekend. They might have maybe made one or two mistakes and maybe some things I would have liked to have seen reviewed that weren't, and one or two things I would have liked to have seen just adjudicated immediately. At some point, I hope the VAR in the Premier League and the rest of European football finds a page from the NFL's expedited reviews or replay assist or whatever they call, where 1 second you think it's a bad call one way, and then they're like, nope, we're going to correct that real quick. We were bad. Our bad. This is what it's supposed to be for. So let's start with, I guess one thing I will bring up before we even go. Do you know this was only the 4th time in 20 weeks there hasn't been at least one, if not multiple, red cards issued in an entire weekend? 0 red cards on the weekend.
I didn't even notice that. That's interesting. Yeah.
There was a back-to-back week period earlier in the year, and then 2 or 3 weeks ago there was one. But other than that, we've had one or more, with the most being 4 red cards in one weekend. And crazy enough, I think that was the weekend or the match week where Liverpool didn't have a fixture. So there was only 9 fixtures and there were 4 red cards. But let's talk about the first, probably the most influential or the highest spotlighted of the weekend, because it dealt with the Arsenal. There's always drama revolving Arsenal, it feels like, in VAR this year. But it was Arsenal versus Brighton. The penalty that was awarded, called on the field by Anthony Taylor for a foul by Saliba on João Pedro. So did you see it when you saw it? If you saw it, and when you saw it in live time, did you think it was a penalty? What are your just overall outreaching thoughts on that?
I think it's interesting that you mentioned that there's always drama with VAR and Arsenal, because my first thought was, when I knew we were going to talk about this, I wanted to ask you, do you think that call would have been controversial if it didn't involve Arsenal? Because, to me, when I saw it live in real time, I thought it was a penalty. When I saw it slowed down on a replay, I thought it was even more of a penalty. And I just feel like Arsenal kind of reminds me of early 2000. I should say early 2000s, 2010, the Mourinho years at Chelsea. Arsenal reminds me of that side where they love the fucking crowd of ref. and they love to throw their hands up, and they love to capitulate on the pitch. Like, I just almost feel like if this didn't involve Arsenal, like this wouldn't have been controversial.
Yeah, I'm not sure it would have been controversial. I'll say this, and I know I've gotten stick in our Discord community and at times on these pods and shows. Like,
no, it seems unlikely.
No, but I mean, I've gotten it for this exact conversation again, which is not unlikely. Because once I decide to hang on something, I'm just going to roll with it. So you kids stop begging for jerseys. I honestly believe that it's actually like excellent officiating, and I think it's Anthony Taylor doing it and not many other referees that would do. And I think that's one of those things, like I saw so many times this weekend where they wave things off. We've talked about it, right? Like wait for the correction because you know there's a virtual assistant behind you. I thought the way Taylor paused and thought about it, kind of replayed what he saw. He was in great position too, by the way. He was right there. So he saw that Pedro gets the touch. He sees the ball go up. And I think he sees Saliba make the touch with his head, which makes him think like, wait a sec here. But then the follow through and where that foul happens, anywhere else on the pitch, head-to-head contact's going to be a foul, whether you intend to do it or not. And we've always said if it's a foul at the halfway line or on the end line of the touch line, it should be a foul inside the box. And to me, you know, it helps João Pedro that his first touch is so bad.
Yeah.
And he takes it so far away from him that he has to lunge. And Saliba lunges thinking I can defend the ball. He catches him with his face. It's head-to-head contact. He points to the spot. There's nothing VAR can do, in my opinion. Proper award of the penalty. So I think we both agree. Good call.
If you're late to a challenge, you're late to a challenge, right? Like it doesn't matter if it's your head. Like,
and as we always say, it's always going to be that way. Precedent is it's a foul. So why not there? I guess my last question on this topic off VAR, but is there a better penalty taker in the Premier League right now than João Pedro?
Probably not. Cole Palmer.
Because that thing was ridiculous. Cole Palmer, maybe. That was side netting, top shelf. I mean,
you could have put the goalkeeper on that side and he still wouldn't have saved it.
Yeah, it was almost like Virgil hitting the game winner there against Chelsea a few years back. I think that was the FA Cup final when we went to shootout. But let's go to the next one, obviously, probably the biggest one, our match, Liverpool versus United, the handball by De Ligt. Okay, we're going to make this one quick. It's Stonewall penalty. It's Stonewall penalty because the hand's away from the body. It's above his shoulder. Proximity is there, but I thought they did a good job of explaining it. I don't know if it was Match Today or one of the shows afterwards over in England where they said, you could even make an argument if he is diving in to like make a block.
Yeah.
And he's lunging. And therefore there's a reason why his arm flails up. He's standing dead still.
Yeah.
And his arm comes up, turns backwards. Obviously United fought it. Mo makes the penalty. When you saw it in real time, did you think it was a handball? Can you believe it wasn't called in real time?
Yes, I can, because I think this, to your first point of the Arsenal discussion with Anthony Taylor reffing a game as if there is no VAR behind him and that being the correct way to ref it. Like, I think what we've seen happen with refs is that they're doing the opposite of that because that's how they were taught to do offside. Like, let the play happen if, unless you know for sure, and then let VAR come in. And I think we have now taken that out of offsides and just unilaterally applied that logic to reffing in general, which I think is the problem. So was I surprised that they let VAR intervene there? No. Was I nervous? Yes, because I thought my concern was when I saw that in real time, I thought it was 100% a handball. But we know how hard it has been to get those handballs called this year. So I thought that it would end up being a proximity thing because the distance was so close. But I still was convinced it was a handball just because even at proximity, your hand has no business being there in the position that De Ligt was in. So I was still nervous. Was I surprised they didn't call it? No. I I think, this is exactly what VAR's there for, though, right? I mean, at least they got him called over. At least we got it rectified. I thought it was a pretty clear handball, though, at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I thought so too. I thought that I think that's only the second or third handball that's been awarded by VAR this year, or even asked to go look at the monitor. And we talk about Anthony Taylor, and there was a stat too that came up when they sent the guy to the monitor. They were like, well, there's only been 2 times since the Premier League instituted VAR that a referee has been recommended to go to the monitor and came back and stuck with his on-field decision. And both times it was Anthony Taylor.
So maybe Anthony Taylor just hates VAR. And he's like, I'm scared.
I think Anthony Taylor is one of these guys who's willing to stand up to making a mistake and say, this is my conviction. I called it not a penalty on the field. I'm not giving it as a penalty. I don't think it's a handball. And I don't like Anthony Taylor. I think Anthony Taylor has issues. I've had problems when he's officiated matches that Liverpool have, specifically when Klopp was there. We always seem to get him at a bad time, and it was always, after Klopp had just undressed a different official the week before. And Anthony Taylor comes across as a guy who probably all his match officials, brethren, hate him. But he's like, they respect me because I stand up for them. I don't care they don't like me, but part of the reason they don't like him is they're the VAR official sends him to the monitor, and he's like, no, that guy, fuck him. Yeah. It ain't fucking good process, mate. With him, it's like, go fuck yourself. You sent me to the monitor? Who the fuck are you? You know who I am? And I do think he's the best official in England, and in a big match, I'd want him officiating that match, because I think, right, wrong, or indifferent, the main prick, as John Ackerberg once described him to me, Megan, and Kazi in a pub right after the Villa match, he literally is willing to referee matches himself. And I have to respect that. I don't have to like him. I don't have to agree with his calls, but I do respect the way he officiates. And I also think he keeps a level of composure on the pitch and tries to allow matches normally to breathe, and kind of puts his pulse on it. And I think that's really, to me, the best thing about an official is when at the end of the match, you're like, I'm not sure I knew his name, but I know he did a good job because I don't have anything to bitch about. And I think he does that more times than most in that league, which probably speaks more to the poor officiating across the league than it does his quality. But, to be the best of the worst is, well, being the tallest midget at the circus. But let's go into this week. Around the grounds culminated this afternoon with Forest just once again just ticking along, beating Wolves 3-0. Really good performance by them. I think it was goals by Gibbs, White. I'm not sure who got the third. I know Wood got one. Oh, I think the former Liverpool striker got one in stoppage time as well. So Forest just keeps clicking along. Another clean sheet. Obviously, Man City bounces back, but is it a bounce back if you beat Julian Lopetegui in West Ham, which I'm not sure if he's actually officially been sacked yet, but I did see earlier today that all indications were he was getting the sack. I'm going to ask you about the manager replacement in a moment here. And then the 2 big ones, I think, are both Chelsea and Arsenal both dropping points, and Newcastle picking up a big 3 points at Spurs to really solidify their claim at a top 4 or 5 place. I think 5 on the bounce right now. Newcastle is making a run, trying to make your prediction of top 4 look really, really good, Paul. So what was the biggest result of the weekend? What was the biggest surprise for you, in whichever order you want to tackle?
I honestly think the biggest result of the weekend, I think you can make an argument for Newcastle. I personally think the biggest result in terms of what it means to that club and what it should mean to the potential of the season is the United draw with Liverpool. Just because I think they needed desperately something so positive to hang on to, that coming to Anfield and getting a point and walking away, they've got to feel pretty good about that. When they were pretty banged up, beat up from a morale standpoint coming in. I do think the Newcastle one's a big one, just because that Tottenham team and Newcastle, those are sort of, I'd put Tottenham, Newcastle, Chelsea, Aston Villa in the same sort of group of teams that are fringe teams looking to permanently settle in the top 4. And so I think and I said this last week or probably 2 weeks ago when I was on, I really think that Newcastle's put this thing together just because they have right now between Joel Linton, Giménez and Tonali, they have the perfect balance in midfield right now. And I think that has really kind of put them at the next level right now. When Isak is healthy and he's got that midfield behind him, they score goals. And so I think it's good. I think the other one that kind of stands out there for me is obviously this is a league where the bottom is so bad and that there's so much parity in the middle of the table that a team like Chelsea should be rolling points. And so to draw late to Palace is just not a great look for them when they seem to have kind of figured a lot of this out.
Yeah, I think Chelsea's kind of regressed back to the mean, and I think that's kind of where they're probably going to end up. I think they're going to be 3rd, 4th fighting with the Newcastles, eventually maybe City if they go on some type of a substantiated run, if they make a good purchase in January or 2. I saw the way that whole thing transpired and unfolded for the weekend, some really interesting things. It's funny you say that. During the watch along we did during Goal Rush, I asked Matoush that. I said, I think you could argue that at times Gravenberch, Szoboszlai, and McAllister have been the most powerful and balanced midfield and at their highest operatic note. But on paper, if you just take Tonali, Giménez, and Joelinton, the power that they have as 3 players together, dribbling, driving forward, making a tackle, sticking in. I mean, it just amazes me that Joelinton was a number 9 flop and Eddie Howe turned him into one of the best 8s in the Premier League. It's the weirdest and most strangest revelation.
He doesn't even look like he's built for it. You know what I mean? It's so.
No, but it's just something about how they all work together. Tonali, I think my comment was, I guess if you were asking me the better overall midfield, I might probably give the slight edge to Liverpool, and it's purely because I think you have to figure in that you have Harvey Elliott's and Curtis Jones's to rotate in with them.
Yeah.
And, even though Sean Longstaff has turned into a much better footballer than I actually thought he would be, he's not as good as these backups, and they don't have a 5th one that they can really do. So I think they could really use it. The PSR rules are bullshit, and it led to them being forced to sell Elliott Anderson, or they would have probably the best midfield, because I think Anderson would have actually pushed Tonali, if not started over him. He's a big reason why Forest has done so well. And now there's big clubs talking about being interested in Anderson because of what he's shown so far this season at Forest. For me, one of the matches that I thought was really intriguing and interesting, even though it turned out to be kind of controversial, was the Fulham Ipswich. Obviously, Fulham's a side that's been in good form this season. Ipswich has gotten so many draws. I saw a crazy stat. Ipswich has dropped 18 points in the final 15 minutes of matches and 19 points from winning position. So they've had leads in almost every match they scored in this year. If they just had a little bit more investment in the summertime, I honestly believe they could have been one of these Wolves type sides that comes up and in their first year finishes 14 to 12. Picks up a bunch of cash, gets the experience, and then builds on it and creates a substantial run. And instead, it's unfortunate. I feel like they're probably going to be the side that finishes in 18th and be a point or 2 away from staying up. What is it about Ipswich that continues to make them concede late? Is it the young defense? Is it the fact that McKenna hasn't changed? He's not Russell Martin kamikaze, but he's not exactly pragmatic either, even when they get a lead. What does Ipswich need to do to formulate enough to stay up for this season?
Obviously they're working with limited tools, but to me, when you have a team that drops points like that from that many points from those positions consistently, to me, that's on the manager, right? Because either A, you've allowed a mindset and a culture to permeate the team. We weren't that far removed from a Liverpool side that did that. Like, remember the tail end of Brendan Rodgers' career, like at Liverpool, where like it seemed like we were just dropping games left and right, like after having leads in the second half. I also put that on the manager to make tactical decisions that shore up your back line and make you more conservative as the match progresses. And I think sometimes Ipswich, what I like about Ipswich, which is kind of their Achilles heel late in games, where they're just so open and they just stay open. You know what I mean? Like that door never closes. So
let's take a look at the bottom of the table here, talking about Ipswich. Southampton just does what they do and drops just embarrassing performances. The new manager bounce has not bounced. Neither has it at Leicester with 5 losses in a row. You're welcome, Rude. And then, of course, Ipswich with their obligatory draw do have a couple of victories, and Wolves lost today, starting to figure it out a bit, but still just right there on points. And then, of course, the inevitable non-scorable Everton. So are we in agreement at this point, Paul, that Palace has probably turned the corner and everyone from Palace above is pretty safe from getting sucked into this thing? Maybe purely to how poor the bottom 5 teams are.
I think so. I think you gotta keep half eye on West Ham here, right? I mean, they continue to just not look great. At the end of the day, they probably got enough there. The other thing that you're looking at here, yeah, like Palace down below, but like for me, Ipswich and Wolves have sort of been like stride for stride right now. But I think the main difference here is that Wolves obviously can score goals, right? And we always say towards the bottom of the table, whoever scores the most goals usually finds their way out of this situation. So you're probably giving yourself the edge to the Wolves. But on the flip side of that, we have an Everton team that scored, 15 goals in 19 matches. And so if that's their reality, that does not bode well for a relegation battle. And if you're in 16th, I think you got to be a little bit worried about that.
Yeah, I mean, it blows my mind that they've only scored 15 goals. It really does. Now, I did think the last couple matches, the attacks looked a little better because they began to start the Chelsea loanee Broha, the Albanian international. But he gets injured, of course, in the 30th minute and has to come off. And with that means you have to bring on Calvert-Lewin, which basically means you're not going to score. So I do think Everton might get sucked in there. They're Everton, so they're like the turd that won't get flushed. Sean Dyche will figure out a way. And again, we've said it before, I think they have the manager who is most equipped to fight for 4, 5, 6 months because he did it for an entire career at Burnley, right? I still think the end of the day, the 3 teams at the bottom are so bad that they'll find their way going down. But keep your eye on Wolves. If they are dumb enough to sell Cunha in January, there is a legitimate shot that they could go down by the end of the season. And if that happens, I won't be upset because, well, I picked them as one of my relegation teams. Looking at the top side of the table, Nottingham Forest sitting in 3rd place, team you picked to get relegated.
I knew that was going to be your transition, you dick. That was a good one. Nice.
It was good. But to be fair to you, you made a huge mistake with Forest and Nuno getting fired first, but you did say that City would finish 4th in the league, and that probably looks like it's probably going to be right around where they are right now, if not even higher. It will not shock me at all if Liverpool goes on and wins this league by a comfortable margin, not even one to the size they have now. But it also wouldn't shock me if City goes on a run and they finish 2nd in this stupid thing and they lose by 8 points. And everyone's like, oh, remember when they were 22 points off of 1st and not going to finish in the top 4? And then Pep rattles off 15 in a row. Looking at this top side, if one of Bournemouth, Villa, or Fulham have a chance to break into this top 5, 6, 7, which side do you think it is and why?
Oh man, if you would have asked me preseason, I would have said Villa. If you're asking me now, I'd probably say Fulham, but I'm probably 60-40 Fulham Villa, if that makes sense. Just because Fulham shows flashes of like brilliance, just straight up brilliance in the way they play. And they can do some really nice things offensively. They've got a lot of dangerous pieces, but then they also do stuff like this past weekend in drawing matches that they probably have no business drawing in if they want to take the next step.
That's kind of where I think that's why I actually lean towards Bournemouth. I think Bournemouth has the most I think Bournemouth plays the best football on the eye. I think Bournemouth has the best collection of young talent. I think they may have the best collection of young talent under 25 in the entire Premier League. Like, it's a pretty special side top to bottom when you look at the kids they have. I think they'll have more players playing in top sides across Europe in the next 10 years or 5 years than any of those other teams.
Battle of the South Coast teams. You would put their roster and their style of play above Brighton right now?
I would, because I think that Bournemouth actually has the one. As much as I love João Pedro, I think João Pedro is one of those guys that needs to go to a big club and not be the number 9 and play off of someone or play as like a false 9. I think they ask him to be their number 9, and it just doesn't work. And him and Ferguson don't work. I also think that there's something broken about the Minta, Matoma, Adinga. I think Ferdy's really good. I don't think it works right now. And I also think Bournemouth's defenders between Kirkes, Zabanyarny, the Hoysen, or whatever the kid's name is, the 19-year-old Spanish kid that Madrid's now interested in. I just think there's something about that Bournemouth team. And I still think like Semenyo, Evangelson, I just think Kluivert, they have a very deep side. And then you see a kid like David Brooks getting an opportunity to play and score that wonderful volley against Everton. Couldn't happen to a better kid who's endured more and deserved it. He was an up-and-coming talent before the cancer and then the Achilles injury. So I think it's something about him. I also think, and I've said this before, I genuinely believe if Pep walks, they'll look at a manager like Iraola to be the type of manager to take over. I think someone that plays an expansive style of football. I think he just plays a brand. And it's so funny because we were all like, they did Gary O'Neill dirty, hiring this foreign guy with no experience. Then he starts the season like 0-6, playing like Ange. And he's like, I ain't changing my principles. This is how I play. And then since I think last December, they've secured the third most amount of points in the entire Premier League outside of Man City and Arsenal. That's an amazing stat. I think they're onto something. And how cool would it be if a club from the
December
South Coast,
2023,
they've accumulated the most points. No, I'm sorry. It's the fourth most. It's City, Arsenal, Villa, then them. That's what it was. And it coincides, if you think about it, with Liverpool starting to drop off last year and really kind of spitting the bit towards the end of the season. But how cool would it be if a team from the south coast of England found a way into European football with a stadium that holds 7,000 people and an open corner? It'd be pretty damn cool. At least for me, at least. So I guess we'll start up this last segment. We're going to give it about 5-10 minutes. It's our stock up, stock down. We're halfway through plus a match of the season. I guess I can start with a pretty easy one. I guess my stock up for the season probably as a team side probably is Bournemouth, seeing that I just waxed poetic about every single player on the team except for Ouattara. That is also a phenomenally young, gifted player. I do really love them. I think that they're on the right trajectory. I think a team like Brighton gets all the plaudits for buying well and selling well. And I think a club like Bournemouth goes under the radar. And I think if you really look at it on paper over the last 3 seasons, I think Bournemouth actually achieved more than Brighton has. Yet Brighton, I think, gets the fanfare because we all talk about how wonderful it is to watch them play. But we don't talk about how wonderful the results are, because more times than not, Brighton finds a way to draw matches they should win, right? And lose some that they shouldn't even draw. So for me, I think my team stock up would be Bournemouth. If I asked you a team on the rise, a team that you would put your money, your Bickler-Coin in, where's that coin going?
On the rise. This is tough because I'm probably late to the ball game here. This is like the 1 week I didn't prepare for this, and you pulled this out of your hat, you son of a bitch, and we haven't done it in any other segment. I feel like you knew that. This is late to the party. Late to the party, so I'm late to invest in this team. But I always said I need to see more from this team before I believe. I need to see more. So I am going to come late to the party and buy now on Forest. I think we talk a lot about Chris Wood. We make the jokes we make there. But I think we don't look at the players like Milinkovic, who anchors that back line, and so many other players in that system who have just really solidified who they are as a team. I talked about how I think I expected some sort of regression just because the goal differential wasn't there. But we've seen this side consistently close 1-goal gap games and close it and continue to close it and then beat teams like Wolves where they need to with clean sheets. So, I'm bought in on them as a club collectively right now.
Yeah, I like that shout. I think, Nuno, if we were putting a stock in a manager, I think you'd have to put some stock in Nuno at this point. He's done a great job, solidified their back line, created, they went out last January, I think it was, and they purchased cells to solidify their goalkeeping area after making the mistake of investing and putting so much stock in Matt Turner. And, you see it with Chris Wood. You see it in their counterattack play. I mean, Gibbs White is a machine. You bring in a guy like Ward Prowse. He creates,
That's really interesting pieces. We always talk about Brighton's ability to sort of bet in South American talent, but we don't even talk about this Nicolas Dominguez, who was considered a bright up-and-coming Argentinian talent that never really caught hold anywhere, and he's just quietly playing lights out. From a stat perspective, it's nothing that from a box score standpoint, to use an American term, it's going to really pop out. But when you watch it, you can just see these sort of players that are so far under the radar to the casual that really make this team work. It's just really kind of interesting and fascinating to watch.
Yeah, and they're getting good play. They're getting good play out of the wingers and Alanga and Hudson-Odoi, which is just funny because it's other big clubs, not small. These are big club castaways, and these are
Gibbs White's Arsenal,
right. And these are youth products from these big clubs that have been, kind of bandied around the Premier League. And I just feel like you just have to tip your cap, in my opinion, to Nuno and what he's doing. So we'll stay on the manager. Let's go stock down. If you stock down in a manager, they're losing their value and no longer something that we're putting Bickler-Coin into.
I'm not going to butcher his name, but the manager at West Ham is definitely there for me, right? I mean, that.
Yeah, Lopetegui.
Yeah, to me, he just seems like there just seems to be a disconnect between what he wants to do, the parts he has, and he seems more important, like he's lost that side. When you watch the communication, they look like they're just nodding to get him to go away.
There's reports that basically he's fired and he knows it. He took training session today, but it's just really that and the reports is they finally just kind of come to grips. They're going to be the club to give Graham Potter the rehabilitation tour. And it's not a bad appointment, in my opinion, if they're willing to give him time to bet in a system. He proved he can manage at Brighton. He also proved at Chelsea that he wasn't ready for a big club and big expectations. But a club like West Ham with players like Somerville and Paqueta and Bowen and you have a base of hard workers like Soufal. They spent so much money. Souček, they spent so much money in the summer on the defense. So, I mean, if Graham Potter can get a system in place and can figure out something at the number 9 position, is Fulkrug the guy? Can you do, obviously they really miss Antonio. Glad to see that, he's still with us after that horrific car accident, but I would be shocked if we ever see him play again in the Premier League. But the talent they have in that side, Kudus, it's there for someone to mold. So Potter could be a good one. If I would have said Lopetegui. I think another manager that you just have to put the stock down on at this point, it's Ange. And I understand he's a good guy and everybody likes him and he can sit at the, at the desk and say mate in his best Australian accent and everyone kind of gets giggly and giddy. It's like, it's like when like one of these American coaches makes a really bad joke and the whole media corps just laughs in unison. You're like, that shit wasn't funny. Why are we all fucking pretending that it was funny?
You mean like every
There's
Miami
something
Dolphins
about
press
it.
conference?
Pretty much, yeah. Dolphins press conference, an old college basketball press conference.
Yeah.
Every single press conference Tiger Woods has ever given.
Oh, God.
But I think when you look at what Ange is doing at Spurs, how quickly it's gotten away. I understand they've had some injuries. They really have been decimated at the back. They lost their keeper. They've been playing without any form of center backs. You're paying a 17-year-old kid who shouldn't even be a center back playing at center back at Spurs. And you're yanking off the international that you signed in Dragusin at halftime because he's just so poor and not up to speed in the league. And yet the man can't alter his plans, can't change anything. He's yanking his club captain. He's sitting Madison from the jump. Like, it just feels like he's lost it. I genuinely feel like he has the month of January to get them to the League Cup final. And if he does, then he's probably out. Am I too critical on Ange? Do you think he's going to get more time? Or do you think his days are almost done, but they're so close to a trophy now, only Jose Mourinho would get fired at this point.
No, I don't think that's too harsh. I think when there is I think there's a difference between being unable to make change and being change resistant, right? And I think what we are kind of figuring out with him is that he's unable to make change. And I think that's the real problem here, right? Like, if he was just change resistant and he just needed, to either find the motivation to change or have a real reason to do it or have somebody in the front office push him towards, be one thing. But I think what we've just seen within matches is that the changes that he makes are just, he tries to make like for like changes when it's like not the pieces that are the problem, it's the actual system, which leads me to believe that that is just not going to work for him. I think it's a combination of like a system that he is unwilling and unable to change, and the fact that the pieces that are a part of it may not be the pieces he needs to do that. But I just don't know if he knows enough about what he has to actually make those calls correctly.
So we go on to an international break of sorts. I joke, it's not really an international break, but it feels like it because we don't have a Premier League match for another week and a half. But we do have, I think, what is one of your favorite weekends of the year, which is the first round of the full slate of FA Cup matches, where we just get the craziness all across the country in play. And obviously, probably the feature match or the highlight match is Arsenal versus Manchester United. Always great to see a club of that stature get knocked out at this early stage. Our boys in Liverpool, they'll be taking on Accrington Stanley. Are you excited for this FA Cup? You need a little break. How are you feeling going into this third round of the FA Cup?
Good with it. I'm actually excited to see what lineup comes out, because I think that Slot can get pretty adventurous when he wants to, and this is a good spot for him to do so. So I'll be really interested to see who he puts out there, because I think anytime that you see heavy rotation in early cup matches, right? I think it's a real insider's view into what the manager is looking at and what he views based on who he puts out.
Interesting. So we'll have to be keeping our eye on that all across the country this weekend in the slate of action. I think it starts Thursday or Friday, and it goes all the way through till Monday, I believe. And of course, we do have some League Cup semifinals this weekend. We'll preview that on our Monday night podcast, which will come up at 8 p.m. Eastern on Mondays, as always, as well as our Thursday podcast, which is 8 p.m. Eastern. Don't forget our Monday, Wednesday, and Friday morning coffee. We're also doing a Tuesday and Thursday morning coffee, because who can't get enough of our crew of panelists. Don't forget the Premier League show and, of course, all of our pre-match and post-match. If you haven't already, please get on over to the YouTube page. Give it a subscription. We really appreciate it. Like and interact with our content. Share with friends. And as always, if you want to get involved, don't hesitate to send us a message. Let us know how, and we will get you into the craziness. For myself and Bickler, this has been another edition of the Premier League show, and we will be back next week. All right, everyone. Have a great week.